Daf Ayin Bays Amar the two dots. Okay, just a quick recap. We had in the Mishnah where if you, for example, shechted on Shabbos when the punishment is death, then you don't pay the monetary side of it because we have the principle of kamle b'dirabne. But if you, let's say, sold it on Shabbos, or you sold it to Avodah Zarah, or you shechted on Yom Kippur, where none of these have incur capital punishments, then you have to pay the monetary penalty. And, and then we said that what happens if you stole it and you shechted it, but not for any particular use? You just said, you did it for your dogs or for medicine, as a salve, not to eat it. Nevertheless, the shchita was effective, and therefore it's treated as if you did tvicha shchita, you pay 4 or 5 times. Then we said, what happened? You shechted it, turned out to be treif, or you shechted it in the Beis Hamikdash, which was chulin, ordinary animal. You shechted the Beis Hamikdash, where the din is you're not allowed to eat it, and you can't have any benefit from it. Again, the Tana Kama says, well, so what? It's still a shchita. You have to pay the 4 or 5 times, even if it wasn't beneficial. You went through the motions of a shchita. Rab Shimon says, no, a shchita she'eina ruah lo yishma shchita. The shchita is not effective. It's not considered a shchita, and therefore you only pay as a ganif the double. You don't pay the 4 or 5 times. So now the Gemara was going to ask a very simple question. We have a discussion. We'll see there's an argument. But how does shchita actually work? In other words, the shchita process, you have to cut through the esophagus and the rave of the esophagus, the majority of the esophagus, and the trachea. But when is it legally considered shchita? Is it only the last moment when you cut through the majority of the second, whatever is the windpipe or the food pipe, that's when it becomes a shchita? Or do we say from the beginning of the process to the end, the entire time it's considered shchita? And what is the difference in halacha? There's a concept, for example, in Zvachim, where if you shecht an animal and you have the wrong time in mind, right? If you shecht an animal, pigel, and you have the time that you have in mind, you'll eat it for 3 days, when it's only a carbon to eat day and night, or 2 days and a night. When you have to have in mind during the shchita, what's considered shchita? If you have in mind, you cut through the esophagus, and right then and there you had in mind, I'm going to do this for a good vach. I'm going to do this for so I can eat it for 2 days and 1 night. Pigel. If the shchita is not considered shchita until you cut the last piece, then there's not pigel here. If you tell me the entire time is called shchita, then it's pigel. So here we're up to the Gemara, the 2 dots on Daf Ayin Beis Amud Aleph, and we are going to discuss the concept of chulin ba'azara, shechting an animal in the Beis Hamikdash when it's not really a carbon, when you're not allowed to eat it and you don't have any benefit. And we are going to discuss also when the shchita takes place, right in the beginning and right in the end. And we are going to assume and conclude as well that the tevachay part, when the Torah says if you shecht a stolen animal, you pay that extra penalty, it's not considered shchita until you finish the job, till the very end. And then how do we know that? Because l'chayda, it could have said in the Torah, ushchata, you shechted it. Why use a word like tevachay? Tevachay means you butchered it. You finished. Shchata can be interpreted from the moment you start. But tevachay definitely means when you complete the job. So you're not chayiv dalad behei until you finish the job. Now, the chulin ba'azara, you don't have any benefit from. So it's important to know when the shchita for chulin ba'azara commenced. If it only takes place at the very end when you finish the shchita, so then therefore, so that happens at the same time when you become a ganef, no problem. But if the chulin ba'azara starts the moment you started shechting it, what happens to chulin ba'azara? Not only is it forbidden to be eaten, you don't have any benefit. If you have no benefit, that means there's no real owner. If there's no real owner, by the time you finished, you completed the shchita, when now you're considered shechting a stolen animal, there was no owner to it. Why are you paying 4 or 5 times? So this is going to prove, or going to try to prove at least, that shchita takes place at the very end in all instances. Says the Gemara, Amar Chabibi, 5 lines on top of the page. Amar Chavivi mechazanor l'Ravashi. So Rabbi Chabibi Chazanor said to Ravashi, Shmamina, from quite conclusive, that ain't no shchita that shchita is not considered shchita legally until you complete the very, very end. You're cutting through the second. Because duration through, let's say,
Rebuttal, your sound has dropped out.
second.
You're frozen.
You hear me now? Anybody can say something if you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Okay. So the yeshna let shchita mitchila b'asay, because if you can tell me shchita the entire duration, keeping the shachar b'purta, as soon as you started cutting, asra. It became chulin ba'azara, became asa b'hana. Asa b'hana means there's no owner. So idach, when you're still continuing to cut, loy demare katavach. You're not cutting an animal that belongs to anybody in particular. And since you don't become a shechting, you're not considered shechting stolen goods until you finish. By the time you shecht it, there's no owner anymore. Why you chayiv? Rav Huna son of Rabba said, "Ki kam mechayiv ahu portin." Rav Huna the son of Rabba said, "You know what you chayiv for? You chayiv." Who said that when you steal an animal and you shecht it, that you're not chayiv until the very end? Maybe the moment you start shechting the stolen animal, that's considered tavachai. You're shechting it, and therefore the chiyuv for shechting starts straight away, and you pay the penalty. And even though chulin ba'azara also starts straight away, but so what? But that moment you were still an owner there, and therefore you have to pay. So perhaps shchita is an entire duration. You're not right. Ravash says, just because you have no answer, don't make up stories. Tvachai means you're not liable for shechting the stolen animal until you finish the shchita. And therefore not when you start. So the obvious question is alakashin. So they asked Ravashi, so we have a problem here. The opinion that says that shchita starts from the beginning and it works its way through the entire time you're slaughtering the animal. So the moment you started, chulin ba'azara became asa b'hana. And the moment nobody can have any benefit from it, there's no owner. If there's no owner, and then when you finish the job, and now you're a gan, if you cemented your ganeva because you shechted an animal that was hefker, that belonged to nobody. Amalei, he said to him, I'll tell you a scenario. You could prove it, but it's not really a proof. You know why? Because there's a possible scenario goes as follows. This is Rav Gamda said the name of Rabba. What happened? You shechted the majority of the animal right by the door, but outside of the base of English, right by the door there. So when you shechted that, there's no chulin ba'azara. You don't become the ganef, the tzvicha by ganef till you finish the job. But then the last second, when you're about to finish the job, you brought the head back. You brought the head into the base of English. So the shchita for chulin and the shchita for geneva happen at the same time, and therefore you are chayiv. So we have no proof one way or another. However, there's another version where this entire conversation actually revolves around the argument directly about shchita. Amar Rav Shimon, Mishum Rebbe Levi Sova, Rav Shimon name Rebbe Sova, English shchita l'soif. Shchita only takes place at the end. But Rabbi Yechon says yes, no, l'shchita mechil l'soif. Shchita starts from the beginning and works its way through. So I have an argument: is shchita only the last second, or shchita is from the beginning, the moment you start till you finish? Let us say that Kesav Rabbi Yechon, we have no choice but to conclude that Rabbi Yechon is of the opinion that chulin shenishchadu bazar lav deraisa. We have to conclude that chulin that was slaughtered in the base of English is not from the Torah that is forbidden to have a no. You're not allowed to eat it from the Torah, but not having benefit must be only midrabbanan, which means mahat Torah, it's still your animal, and you can sell it and do whatever you want with it. But midrabbanan, it's awesome, and I'll prove it to you. And what is that? Because if you can tell me mahat Torah, the animal is forbidden to have a no. So, and according to Rabbi Yechon, shchita takes place the entire duration. So it means the moment you started shechting the animal, it now became asa b'hana. So by the time you shechted the stolen animal, it was nobody's animal. So why are you paying 4 or 5 times? unless Rabbi Yochanan will hold that it's only midrabanan that you cannot have any benefit from it, not from the Torah. From the Torah, you're allowed to have benefit, so it's your animal, and the Torah says you shechted it, you stole a stolen animal, you pay the full penalty. The Isal Kadata the Raisa from the Torah, Mechishachile Purta, the moment you shech a little bit, Osra Idach, the rest of the animal becomes also Lava the Mara Katavach. Or Osra Kama, Idach Lava the Mara Katavach. The rest of the animal doesn't belong to anybody. So it must be Rabban. Here we say it's Rabba son of Acha. Previously we said it was Abhuna, Rabba son. Why can't it be that you're chayiv for stolen goods the first second you started to shech? So therefore, the chulin ba'azara became also b'hana mehatayr at the same time when you shechted the stolen animal. Allah Rashi, like titche, you cannot push it away because it says v'tvacha kulei be'ina v'leka. It says v'tvacha. Tvacha means that you have to butcher it, you have to kill it completely. When are you liable for shechting a stolen animal? Only when you finish the job. Nu kasha. So how can Rabbi Yochanan then say that the tvicha for Geneva is at the very end? Chulin bazara starts from the beginning. So l'chayla, if it's asa bahana, then why you're chayiv? Whose animal is it? So you must conclude Rabbi Yochanan holds that it's only asa midrabanan, and we know Rabbi Yochanan himself holds that's mahatayra. According to some. This is what Rav Gamda said in the name of Rava. No, it's quite possible that Chulin is Asavana completely. And you're not liable for Tvicha until the very end. But it's possible that Chulin also happened at the very end. How? The Kabirchen holds Yeshna, the Shchita, Metchilat, so it starts from the beginning. You know, when you chayiv, there's a shochad mitzvah simanim b'chutz, the gomran b'frid. You shechted some of the simanim outside, and then the very last bit you brought it into the base of Mikdash. So the chulin ba'azar that becomes forbidden to have any pleasure happened exactly the same time when you finish the shchita for the stolen goods. So therefore, because it all happened at the same time, it makes sense why you have to pay 4 or 5 times. Tracer here explains that if something is asr b'hanam with rabbanon, we cannot automatically conclude the text of Mahatayr it's really yours, and technically it's yours. But Tracer says, in the case of chulin ba'azara, it's a lesser prohibition. So, for example, it's forbidden to have anah from the rabbanon. What happens? He gave it to a woman for kedushin. Allah, she's mekudesh, because since Mahatayr, the Torah recognizes that you're allowed to have hanah. So therefore, you gave a kedushin. Either Rabbanan says you can't have hanah, but you still kedushin. You need to get. But says Taisus, if you took something you sacrificed to avodah zarah, which is forbidden to have hanah mid Rabbanan, it's called takreivus avodah zarah. It's only mid Rabbanan. If you gave it to a woman mekudesh, you would not be mekudesh, even though it's Rabbanan. But the Rabbanan there came down much stronger. So there are degrees, different levels of the Rabbanan. When we say that something is asur b'hanah, how do we treat it? Okay, next Mishnah, we continue along the same theme. So we're talking about you stolen goods, you pay double, and then if you shechted it, you pay 4 or 5 times. 4 or 5 times means an additional 2 or 3 times. So you pay the principal, the penalty of double, then another 2 or 3 times. So it says the Mishnah a few cases. God of Apishnayim, you stole, and based on 2 witnesses, so obviously they take you to court, you'd have to pay the penalty. Then and then the same 2 witnesses also testify that you shechted it. Benim to Zaymin is as follows. There's 2 different cases here. You have a normal case of where Adam come to court, and we believe them. Then what happens if you have another group of Adam that completely contradict what the first group says? For example, first group says that Reuben killed Shimon. Comes along another group and says Reuben did not kill Shimon. What does the court do? We have no idea what to do, so we throw the entire case out. We throw it out. What happens in the future with these 4 witnesses? So in the Gemara Babasha and Cheskel Abatim will have an argument, Rabba Rav Chizda, as to is there credibility shot, and or not. And according to one opinion, obviously you cannot use the Eidos anymore. Another opinion says no. Since we don't know which one is the bad one, each one has a cheskes kashrus, we trust them. The only thing we cannot do is have one witness from one group and another witness from another group, that they should combine. That for sure not, because one of them definitely is a liar. That's called hakchoshen, contradicting each other. And the bezin doesn't know what to believe, so they throw the whole thing out. Then we have a case called hazama. Hazama is very different. The first group comes along and says Reuben killed Shimon Sunday in Melbourne. Comes along group number 2 and says, hey, whether Reuben killed Shimon in Melbourne on Sunday, possibly he did, we have no idea. But one thing we do know, you were not in Melbourne on Sunday, you were with us in Sydney. So the din is, we believe the second group. And we actually punish the first group. The very same penalty that they tried to make for the first group, that's what we punish them with. And it's only if the Bezdin came to a final decision. If Bezdin didn't come to a final decision, they just they came with a story, and then Aiden Zayman came along and said that you guys weren't there, nothing happens. It's only if Bezdin came down with a sentence, then we say, okay, now you're considered Eidim Zayman. Because Eidim Zayman, the pshat is not the Aveda where said the other person did, it's as if we did the Aveda. For example, they come along and say, this person was Mechal Shabbos, and turned out to be we were liars, and the Bezdin was about to give that person skila, so the Bezdin will give us skila. So not the pshat is that we were Mechal Shabbos, let's say I'm the Eidim Zayman, not that we were Mechal Shabbos, we don't take on their Aveda, we take out the outcome of that Avera, the punishment of that Avera. Their punishment would have been skila, now we take over and we get the skila. That's what the Eidim Zayman are. The question is, why is it that by Eidim Zayman we believe the second pair rather than the first pair? Why Hachasha, we don't know who to believe. So in the case of Zayman, it should be the same thing. These guys say it happened on Sunday. These guys say you weren't there on Sunday. So how do you know who to believe? The Gemara will talk about that in a minute. So now, what happened? Sorry?
Nothing. What happened? You said it's only if a judgment's been made already by the court. Yes. What happens if the judgment's been made and the penalty's been carried out already?
So there the Gemara that Hay says in Makkos, Hargu ain't haragim. And that is that if the Bezdin actually carried out the punishment when it comes to death, then Hargu ain't haragim. Once they got killed, then we no longer kill the Eidim Zayman. When it comes to money matters, the Riva says we do. Even if Reuven ended up paying Shimon when he shouldn't have, not a problem. We can always take the money back. By Malkus, there's a big machlekes. But when it comes to Misa death, once Bezdin Hargu, ain't haragim. And even though the Dukin said it doesn't make sense, Madach, where the Bezdin only tried to kill somebody based on your account, you're going to get killed. When Bezdin actually killed an innocent person, you shouldn't get killed. They couldn't get their head around it. So there are two schools of thought, diametrically opposed, the logic behind it. One is the Bes Yosef. The Bes Yosef said, the logic behind it is very simple. The Torah gave us punishments for each crime. Each punishment suits the crime. But when it comes to Eidim Zayman, they stood there and they watched an innocent person die. And they used the tools of the Torah. They used the instruments of the Torah. They used the Bezdin to kill an innocent person. That crime is so grave that the punishment that we normally assign for murder is not good enough for them. Their punishment should be far worse. Because when you give someone a punishment, it's like an atonement. We don't want they should be atoned. This is such a grievous, such a grave sin that we don't want skillah. They need much worse than skillah. That's why we do not give them the punishment. That's one view. The other view is the Ramban. He learns exactly the opposite, and it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. The Ramban says, you know why? It's one thing if the Bezdin attempted to kill, it's another thing if Bezdin actually killed. Remember, the Torah says you have to go to Bezdin. So everything that the Bezdin did, they follow the procedures of the Torah. So how can they go wrong? They did everything the Torah told them to do. They interrogated everything. How did they go wrong? Says the Ramban, we believe in a concept called divine providence. If the end of if before Bezdin actually committed the skila to Reuben, let's say they punished before they actually punished Reuben, they gave him the skila. The Eidim Zayman came just in the nick of time. That proves that Reuven should not have died, should not have been killed, which he won't be, and that proves that these Eidim are terrible people, and we have to kill the Eidim in their place. But if Reuven was killed by the Bezdin, that means the Torah agreed that Reuven had to die. So even though these witnesses were liars and they're terrible people, but the outcome, which is Reuven died in the hands of a Bezdin, wasn't wrong. And therefore, because otherwise the Eibush would not have allowed it to happen. And therefore the Eidim Zayman don't get punished. Because an innocent person was not killed here. There's no way that the Eibush would allow the Bezdin to kill an innocent person. Even though we have a whole story in Sanhedrin of Shimon Meshatach, but there everyone knew that they were liars. We'll learn about it when we get there. And but Shimon Meshatach felt we have to continue. And yeah, that's the logic. Okay, back to the Mishnah. So the Eidim said they were stolen, and he shechted Benim Shazayim, they were liars. So the Eidim have to pay everything. The Shaman Hakol, they pay everything. They pay everything to this person that they try to cause to pay. What about Golav Abishnaim, Vidom Abishnaim Achein? There are two sets of witnesses. One set of witnesses that we saw the guy steal, and another set that we saw Shecht. They don't know whose animal he shechted, the second group. So the second group needs the first group. First, we need to establish it was stolen goods, and then the second group comes along and says he was shechted. And then it turned out to be Elu, the Elu Nimtuzah. They're both set of liars. So then the first group only tried to make him pay the penalty, the kafel, so they pay the principal of the penalty. And the second group would try to make him pay the additional 2 or 3 times, depending on what kind of animal it was. So they have to pay that. So the first group pays double, and the second group pays the remaining 2 or 3 times. What happens if the second group was found to be liars, but not the first group? So the first group accused this person of let's say, Levi of being a ganav, and that stays. They also said that he was Bava Kama Daf, and that a different group said he was Bava Kama Daf, and that proved to be a lie. So Levi doesn't pay the 2 or 3 times extra. In fact, he receives it because those Eidim who are liars pay him out. But Levi does have to pay the double because those Eidim who said that he stole it are still correct, are still credible. Who nimmt achreinim zaymin? Who mishal tashlum kefil? He pays kefil. Behem mishal mit tashlum gimel, and they pay 3. What happens if now, in order for Eidim Zaymin to be Eidim Zaymin, you need that all the witnesses that were involved were found to be liars, that they were not there at the time. So if you're having 5 witnesses, and Eidim come along and said 4 of the 5, you guys weren't even there. So the Eidim falls apart, but nobody gets punished. In order to punish Achi Yizumu Shnei, you need all of them to be caught out. So what happens if one person in the second group was found to be a liar? Then the thing is Butler Eidu Shnia, so that testimony falls out, but nobody gets punished. Nobody gets the second group does not get punished because you need both of them to be found liars. What about Echad? But the first group is still stands, and you have to pay, the Geneva, the principal, and the kefil. But what happens if Butler is Echad and the Rishayin? They found in the first group that one of the 2 witnesses was Muslim because he was somewhere else. That Eidos falls apart. Does it have any bearing about the Shechti? Butler Kola Eidos. There's nothing stolen. First of all, as far as penalty is concerned, because the penalty of 4 or 5 times is predicated that first we have the double for stolen goods, and then we have another 2 or 3 times. But if it wasn't stolen, then all they have to pay is 2 or 3 times. That's not what the Torah says. Or how do we know the reason why the whole lady falls apart is because the second group didn't say that he stole the animal and he shechted. They just said we saw him shecht the animal, but they have no idea who owned the animal. So therefore, once the first group has been found zaymin liars, that means whose animal was it really? The original owner. So the second group didn't say that he stole it. So their testimony hasn't changed. So that's why there's no penalty there. Okay, that's what some of Farshim say. Gemara. Now we're going to talk about Eid Zaymin. Interesting that we can discuss here such a fundamental concept about Eid Zaymin when the Gemara of Eid Zaymin is mainly a Makkas, a little bit of Sanhedrin, and then suddenly here we throw in this very important argument. Eid Zaymin. Abaye says Lemafreya Honifsun. The question is as follows: comes the month of Nisan, 2 weeks ago to court and say that the Reuben killed Shimon. Comes the month of Tammuz, 2 witnesses come to court and say that this first group, were liars. Bezdin, for whatever reason, didn't kill Shimon yet, didn't kill Reuben yet. And another group comes in and says that this guy here, these guys were not there at the time, so they're found to be liars, Muslim. But so what happens? They're no longer credible. Forget about the punishment; they're no longer credible. Let's not talk about death. But any case where they were found to be liars, you weren't there at the time. How do you couldn't have said what you said? So when do we date back that how far back do we go? We say, look, any testimony you gave is no longer going to be accepted and we're throwing it out of court. Do we go back to the time when they lied? They lied in Nisan about Reuben owning mine to Shimon, and in Tammuz they were found to be liars. Is it retrospective? Do we go back to and say, look, that's when you said the lie, so from then on, anything you did from then on in, we throw out, we don't care what it was? Or do we say, the fact is that they weren't caught out, and they weren't established to be liars until the month of Tammuz. So from Tammuz and onwards, we can no longer accept any of the testimonies. But in the interim period, yes, we do. Now, what's going on is we have an argument of Abaya and Rava, and this is from the few exceptions where the halacha is like Abaya. Itma we learn, Eid Zaymim, an aid that's found to be alive. Abaya Amar Lim Mafreyahu Nifsul. It's retrospective from the time that he gave his testimony. Obviously, it was a lie. So from then on in, anything he said afterwards, we throw out of court. And Rava says, no, we can't ulahabon nifsul. It's only when he was caught out. Now, the moment he said the testimony, he was Raya Russia. Just because we didn't know doesn't change the facts. He was a liar, he was a Russia. And the Torah says, Al Toshes Russia aid. Now, interesting, there's no such pasuk as Al Toshes Russia aid. And the pasuk is Al Toshes Yodcha Im Russia. And the way the Gemara puts it down here is Al Toshes Russia aid. There's a Gillian Hashas from Rabbi Kiva Eger, and I can't remember where it is offhand, where he puts together a number of psukim in the Gemara, which we don't have, or the Gemara misquotes. And it says in the Sfarim that the reason for that is if the Amoira, whoever is saying this, did not have a chumash in front of them, so they were saying it by heart, and Torah Shebiksav is not permitted to be said by heart, so deliberately they would distort the pasuk. So they're not saying Torah Shebiksav by heart. So that's why the Gemara always says, the Gemara uses Al Tosh Rosh Eid, even though there's no such pasuk. And Rava says, Mekanal Haban Ifsul. So what's the logic of Rava? Why from now on it should be retrospective? Because Chiddishu, the whole concept is a Chiddish. Why is it a Chiddish? So today, is two Eidim against two Eidim. My chaz is, why do you deem it the Tzayis Lahani? Why do you listen to this group? Listen to the other group. Therefore, Ein Lach Boy Elamashas Chiddish ve'Elech. So the argument is as follows. Rava holds, why should Eidim Zayman be any different than Eidim HaKosher? By Eidim HaKosher, where the first group says this happened, the second group says it did not happen, we don't know who to believe, we throw the whole thing out. When the first group says that this happened on a Sunday, the second group says, but you weren't there, suddenly we believe the second group. Why should it be any different? See, as Rava said, this is a Chiddush. So whenever there's a Chiddush, you're limited to what the Torah spells out. You cannot draw any inferences, you cannot use logic, you cannot expand on it. Since the Torah does not say it's retrospective, we can't make it retrospective. It's only from this moment when Bezdin makes a ruling, it's a Chiddush, these people are liars, and that's it from now on. So what does Abaya hold? And here there's a big discussion as to what Abaya actually holds. Some people want to say that Abaya argues on this very principle if Ein by Ela Chidushu, that Chidushu, and we cannot expand. Abaya holds you could. In fact, they use that to explain a number of contradictions in the Rambam. That Abaya doesn't say that once the Torah put it in the Torah legislated, we have a right then to expand and try to draw parallels and inferences and all that kind of stuff. That's one version. Another version is a Tur. The Tur says there's actually a logic to the whole thing. And what is the logic? The Tur says as follows. The logic is that the Tur says, you know the logic is? That what happens if two Eidim, as the Gemara will say soon, what happens if two Eidim come along and say that you guys are Ganavim? So you have no credibility whatsoever. Then we throw the testimony out because these first two guys can no longer defend themselves because they're in the Gebedov. They have a vested interest. They're biased, obviously. So that's it. The second group comes along and attacks them personally. There's nothing they can do. Says the Tur, when you come along and you say, whether Reuven killed Shimon or not, we don't know. No, we're not attacking your testimony. We have no idea. But what we are saying is that you were not there at the time. So they're becoming very personal. And the only way for them to defend themselves is, oh, yes, but we were there. That's already in the Geba Dover. You're talking about yourself. And therefore, says Abba, you will believe the second pair. That's why. And so what about Rava? Why does he say it's a Chiddush? So some say that when Rava says it's a Chiddush, it's not regarding why we believe the second group. It's that we punished the first group. We're actually punishing them. And that's the Chiddush. That they, I mean, okay, people do Aveda, but the Bezdin should punish them and give them the same punishment that they tried to do. That is the Chiddush. Others say Rava disagrees with Abaya's premise, and the reason is very simple. Rava says when the first group comes along and says Reuven killed Shimon on a Sunday, they're saying two things. They're saying Reuven killed Shimon on Sunday. They're also saying, and we were there because we saw it. We're giving testimony here, and we were there on Sunday. So when the second group comes along and says, but you were not there on Sunday, you're with us, that falls back to Hakasha. we're contradicting your testimony. It's not just personal. We're contradicting because your testimony was, if we nuance it, that not only Reuben killed Shimon on Sunday, but you were actually there. Because otherwise, what are you doing here in court? You were there, and we're saying you were not there. So we're having a contradiction. And what's the din by Chasha? You throw it out of court. So how come in this case we believe the second group? That's a chiddush. And that's what Rav was saying. That's the chiddush. And Abai is saying, because you didn't talk about yourselves, you only talked about Reuben killing Shimon. And obviously you were there, but that's not what your testimony is. So that part that you were there is not part of the testimony. And therefore, when the second group comes, we're attacking you personally, saying that you weren't there. So that's how generally we explain it. Says the Gemara. That's one version. Another version is, we'll quickly go here. Rava holds like a bias retrospective. The time the Rava, so why does Rava therefore say, if he also agrees retrospective, so how come he said we're only going to say from now on their testimony is not accepted anymore? From Seder Lekuchas. It's not fair. In the interim period, these agents might have come and signed documents on behalf of different buyer purchasers. And if we throw it all out, these purchasers have no proof that they bought anything. So in order to protect the livelihood of these purchasers, we decide, you know what, we're going to accept all the documents that these people signed. So when my benayu, what's the difference? Whatever reason, the fact is, Rava says that we don't accept the testimony only beyond this point, but prior to that we do. What's the difference if it's because the chiddush, or the difference is because we want to protect the lekuchas? As follows: what happens in a case where there's no chiddush? For example, as hidu beitrei lechad v'trei lechad. What happens if two witnesses come along and say to one of the second group comes along, like four witnesses. Two of them say to the first guy, you weren't in Melbourne at the time, you were with us in Sydney. And another two witnesses come and say to the second guy, you were with us in Perth. So now it's 2 against 1. 2 against 1 and 2 against 1. And that's no chiddush that we believe the 2 versus the 1. So that's one difference. Where there's no chiddush. And another thing is, he says, they directly attack him and say that you're a ganef. And because they say that you're a ganef, they can no longer defend themselves. So there's no chiddush anymore, we believe the second group. So the one who says the chiddush lekam. Then in this case, even Rabbi will agree to retrospective. We try to protect the kuchas. Even in this case here, when we have to try to protect the kuchas, and therefore they're not possible until afterwards. In other words, if the second group came along and said, you guys are gazlonim, it's still not retrospective. It's only from that point and onwards. So Tej already asks, so then l'chayda, there's a very simple logic now why you believe the second group, because they have a migud. They could have said, you guys are ganavim. And instead we said, you were with us. So believe them because of a migud. And Tej says, one of the answers he gives is that two witnesses don't have a migud. A migud means you could have said a better lie. But if I'm with somebody else, I'm always scared that other person won't come up with the same lie. He's not as smart as I am. Won't think of it, and then we'll we'll contradict each other. So therefore, there's no migu. You can't say, "Oh, you could have thought a better lie." Whatever they said, they probably prepared, and that's it. Gemara concludes. Rashi comes along and said, "No, hilchas kavos lebaya," and the rule is the hilchas kavos lebaya. The halacha is like Abaya in 6 cases, Yal Kagam. Yud stands for Yehu Shalom Medas. If you lost something, you didn't know about it. And the Ayin stands for Eid Zaymim Lemafreya. We say that what? An Eid Zaymim Lemafreya Nifsel, we pass him like Abaya. So we'll stop here. Everyone have a good day and a good vach and a shvuah tov.